Why did the child laugh when no one else dared to? The briefing room was carved out of concrete, cold and colorless. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed above, drowning in the silence of men and women who had seen too much. Maps stretched across the wall, black lines cutting through contested valleys, red circles marking danger zones. Soldiers shifted in their seats, eyes fixed forward, hands folded like statues. Every breath felt heavy with expectation. And then from the far corner, a small sound, a giggle. It was so out of place that heads turned instantly, searching. And there he was, a boy no older than 7, seated beside the interpreter. He wasn't supposed to be here. Civilians didn't sit in on military strategy, but this was different. This was his village, his family's ground they'd be stepping on. The interpreter had insisted the boy had seen things. Things only he could explain. He was staring at one of the soldiers, not just any soldier, her. Her face had been carved by discipline, by restraint, by all the long years of learning to betray nothing. A soldier's face was supposed to be stone, no tremor, no smile, no weakness. Yet something in her eyes, perhaps the stillness, perhaps the weariness etched into the corners of her mouth, had struck the child as funny. He covered his mouth, but the laugh escaped again. The room froze. Soldiers glanced at her, at the boy, back at her. And she didn't move. Not yet. No one knew what reaction they expected. A sharp rebuke, a glare, the coldness she was known for. After all, she was the sniper who spoke less than she shot, the pilot who flew missions without banter, the operative who carried herself like silence was armor. She was not the type to be mocked. But there was something they hadn't seen, something she hadn't told them. The boy's laughter cut through her like shrapnel, not because it mocked, but because it reminded. A memory, jagged and uninvited. Her daughter, laughing in the kitchen back home, before everything went dark. Before a call had dragged her across oceans and dropped her into this war-torn valley. She hadn't heard that sound, that innocent, unfiltered joy, in years. And now here it was again, from a stranger's child. Her lips shifted, the slightest movement, barely a curve, not a smile, not fully, but enough to silence the room in disbelief. Because for her, any break in the mask was a story in itself. The commander cleared his throat, breaking the moment, snapping the room back into military order. Coordinates were given, routes discussed, contingencies laid out. But the boy's laugh lingered in the walls like smoke, and her small reaction, the almost smile, lingered even longer. No one said a word about it, but everyone felt it. Hours later, she walked the corridor alone. Boots echoed on concrete, each step tight, controlled. The air smelled faintly of gun, oil, dust, and stale coffee. She hated the waiting before missions. The way silence seemed to grow teeth, biting into her thoughts. A voice called her name, the interpreter. "The boy," he said, catching up. "He wasn't mocking you. He said you looked like a hawk, too serious, always watching." Her jaw tightened. A hawk, maybe that was true, always scanning, never resting. "He respects you," the interpreter added softly. "Children laugh when they're nervous too. He doesn't laugh at you. He laughs because you make him feel safe." Safe, the word felt foreign. She was used to being called lethal, efficient, unshakable, never safe. But the interpreter was gone before she could answer. Alone again, she leaned against the wall, just for a second, just long enough to close her eyes. The hum of distant generators filled the silence. She inhaled, sharp, steady, reminding herself of the mission. Tomorrow they would move into the valley. Tomorrow there would be no room for children's laughter or for memories of a daughter long gone. But tonight, that sound lingered. She told no one. The morning broke gray and cold. The valley stretched out beneath them like a scar across the earth. Low clouds hugged the mountains, their peaks hidden, their silence heavy. She adjusted her rifle strap against her shoulder as the convoy crept along dirt roads. The boys' village was ahead, a cluster of stone homes clinging to the hillside, smoke rising in thin threads. Inside the vehicle, she kept her eyes on the terrain. Every shadow could be a muzzle, every rooftop a scope. Her mind cataloged details with machine precision. A broken wall, fresh tire tracks, the absence of livestock. And yet behind all of it, one thought pressed forward. Would the boy be there waiting? She forced the thought away. Distraction was a weakness. A soldier who carried ghosts into a mission risked everyone else's life. The convoy stopped at the edge of the village. Children scattered at the sight of soldiers. Doors shut quickly, wood slamming against stone. Fear rolled through the air like dust. She stepped down, boots sinking into the earth, scanning the rooftops. And then movement, not hostile, small. The boy. He stood in the alley, watching. Not laughing now. Just staring at her the way only children do, unblinking, without shame, as though trying to read her soul. Her chest tightened. She looked away, signaling the team to spread out. The villagers gathered reluctantly, drawn by the interpreter's voice. They pointed to the hills, to the caves. The enemy had passed through, had taken supplies, had left warnings scratched into doors. The tension was thick, layered with fear and resentment. But her eyes kept straying back, to him. He mimicked her posture, folding his arms, standing tall, as if he too were a soldier. And for a fleeting second she almost smiled again. Almost. Not here, not now. The mission pressed on, houses searched, questions asked, evidence collected. But the boy's gaze followed her everywhere, an anchor, a reminder that behind the maps and orders and rifles, there were eyes watching, young and untainted. Eyes that laughed when they shouldn't. Eyes that saw her not as a machine of war, but as something else. What that something else was, she didn't know yet. But the question haunted her as the sun began to sink behind the mountains, painting the valley in blood-orange light. That night the team set up camp outside the village. The air grew colder, biting through fabric, carrying the smell of wood smoke from distant fires. She lay awake, staring at the fabric ceiling of her tent, listening to the murmur of soldiers outside. Stories drifted through the night. One spoke of a wife waiting back home, another of a father he barely knew. Little fragments of humanity seeping through the armor of uniform and rank. She closed her eyes, but sleep wouldn't come. Instead, the boy's laughter came back, sharp, clear, alive. And with it the kitchen, the smell of pancakes. Her daughter's voice, high, innocent, mocking her stern, "Don't play with your food" face. That memory had been buried, locked away where it couldn't hurt. But now the lock was broken. Her throat tightened. She turned onto her side, fists clenched. Soldiers weren't supposed to cry, especially not alone, especially not in silence, but her eyes burned. What had the boy seen in her? Why had his laugh pierced where bullets hadn't? She didn't know. Not yet. But tomorrow would bring answers, one way or another. Why did she notice the silence before anyone else? The next morning the valley was still, too still. No dogs barked, no tools clanged, no children's voices carried through the air. Villages always had noise, life, even under the shadow of war. But today only the wind whispered through the mountain passes. Her fingers tightened around the rifle strap across her chest. Something was wrong. The commander signaled the squad forward. Boots crunched on gravel. Radios murmured in clipped tones. Soldiers scanned rooftops, alleys, windows, but found nothing. The stillness pressed heavier with every step. She walked slightly apart, eyes always moving. Every crack in the stone walls, every piece of cloth hanging from a line, every shadow in the corner, she cataloged them like she always did. But something gnawed at her gut. That sixth sense, the one built from years of surviving where others didn't. And then she saw him. The boy. Half hidden behind a wall at the edge of the village, peeking out. His eyes locked on hers. This time there was no laughter. His small hand moved just once, flat palm against his chest, then pressed down sharply toward the earth. "Stay down." Her heart skipped. Without thinking, she dropped to one knee. "Down," she hissed, voice low but sharp enough to cut. Confusion rippled through the squad, a split second of hesitation, too long. The explosion tore through the silence. A deafening crack, the ground lifting, dust and stone ripping the air. The lead vehicle was gone in fire, metal twisting like paper, smoke rising in a black pillar. Screams echoed. The concussion slammed her chest, ears ringing. Chaos. Gunfire rattled from the hills. Bullets snapped past, hitting dirt, tearing walls. Civilians screamed, scattering like frightened birds. The squad scrambled for cover, rifles up, shouting commands drowned by the roar of battle. She pressed herself against a wall, lungs burning, rifle swinging upward. Her eyes scanned the ridgeline. Shadows moved, muzzle flashes like sparks in the dark. She squeezed the trigger. One target dropped. Another darted back behind rocks. But her mind wasn't on them. It was on him. The boy. Where was he now? Her pulse hammered, each beat echoing louder than the gunfire. She checked the wall where he had been. Empty, gone. The fight dragged on minutes that felt like hours. Finally, with air support called in, the hillside quieted. Smoke curled from the wreckage, the valley echoing with groans of wounded and cries of villagers. When the last shots faded, she lowered her rifle slowly. The world spun in that heavy silence again, the silence after violence, where nothing feels real. She pushed to her feet. Dust streaked her uniform. Her jaw ached from clenching. Around her, soldiers tended to the injured, secured the perimeter, cursed under their breath at the loss of another vehicle. But she was searching, eyes scanning, desperate though she didn't let it show. Then a tug. She looked down. Him. The boy, covered in dust, a small cut bleeding across his forehead, but alive, wide-eyed. He looked at her with something different now. Not laughter, not mischief, something sharper, something like trust. She crouched, lowering her voice so no one else could hear. You knew. He nodded once. Her throat tightened. She wanted to ask how, why, when, but the words died before leaving her mouth, because she realized he wasn't supposed to be here. No child was supposed to stand this close to fire, to blood, to smoke. And yet here he was. That night, after the dead were counted and the wounded flown out, the squad sat in low murmurs around dim lanterns. Faces drawn, eyes hollow. One man stared at the dirt, muttering about how close he'd been to the blast. Another pulled out a photo of a newborn, lips trembling though no tears fell. They all had stories. They all had someone waiting or someone gone. She sat apart, cleaning her rifle. The smell of burnt metal still clung to the air. She moved with methodical precision, the ritual of stripping, wiping, reassembling. But her mind wasn't on the weapon. It was on a kitchen table. Her daughter's small hands patting dough flat, flour dusting her cheeks, laughter filling the room. A sound so close to what she had heard in the briefing room. And the boy. Why had fate put him in her path? She remembered the way he had pressed his hand to his chest. Stay down. That gesture had saved lives, her life. And yet no one else spoke of him. No one else noticed. To them, he was just another village child. But to her, he was a mirror. Later, the commander approached her tent. His shadow stretched across the fabric before his voice did. You froze. She looked up sharply. Sir. You dropped before the blast. No hesitation, you called it. Her jaw clenched. She wanted to tell him it wasn't her, that it was the boy, but the words wouldn't come. Something in her chest refused to expose him. The commander studied her face, waiting, silence stretched. Finally, he exhaled. Good instincts, keep them sharp, we'll need them. He left. She sat in the dark, rifle across her lap, staring at the floor. Her instincts, no, not this time. This time, it was something else. Someone else. The next day, patrols combed the valley. She walked with them, eyes scanning the ridges, ears tuned to every distant sound. But always, always, she found herself searching for him, for the boy. And when she saw him again, standing with villagers at the well, carrying a bucket too heavy for his arms, she felt something shift inside. Not softness, not exactly, but something that cracked through the stone. He glanced at her, caught her watching, and for the briefest second his mouth curved. That same half-smile he had worn when he laughed in the briefing room. And before she could stop herself, she almost returned it. Almost. That night she didn't sleep. She sat outside instead, the stars scattered cold above the black peaks. The valley was quiet again, but the quiet no longer felt empty. It felt weighted, as if the mountains themselves carried secrets. Her hand drifted to the small photograph she kept tucked inside her chest pocket. Worn, edges frayed, colors fading. Her daughter's face, frozen in time. The only picture she carried on missions. Her throat tightened. She hadn't let herself look at it in months. It hurt too much. But tonight, with the memory of the boy's warning still sharp, she stared. And whispered into the silence, "Am I protecting him, or is he protecting me?" No answer came, only the wind through the valley. But the question lingered, echoing inside her chest. Why did the boy wait for her in the shadows? She noticed him first at dawn. The camp was stirring, soldiers moving with the stiffness of bodies that had carried too much weight the day before. Coffee brewed, thick and bitter. Weapons clicked under practiced hands. Orders murmured low. And there he was. Not with the villagers, not hiding. Just standing at the edge of the camp, his small frame caught in the pale morning light, watching her with those unblinking eyes. She tightened the strap on her vest, jaw set. She didn't acknowledge him, not here, not in front of the others. But when she moved, he followed. Down the dirt path, past the well, toward the tree line where the air smelled of pine and smoke. Silent, always silent, until finally, when no one else could hear, he spoke. "You don't look the same." Her step faltered, she turned sharply. "What?" He pointed, small hand, blunt words. "Last night, your eyes, different." Her throat closed. He was right, and it unsettled her. Children shouldn't notice things like that, shouldn't read the exhaustion behind a mask designed to show nothing. But this boy saw too much. She knelt, lowering her voice. "Why are you here?" His answer was simple, too simple. "Because you're here." She studied him, the dirt smudged on his cheek, the scrape on his knee, the weight in his voice that didn't belong to someone his age. He reminded her too much of the child she once tucked in at night, the one who never saw her in uniform, who never knew what she did in the shadows of the world. And she hated herself for it. Because every time she looked at him, she felt something she couldn't afford, the ache of being human. By noon, the squad was on the move again. Intelligence pointed to a network of caves high in the ridges, supply routes carved into the stone, the kind of ground where enemies hid and patience ran thin. The climb was brutal. Loose rocks slid under boots, the sun hammered down, and silence pressed tight against their throats. Sweat stung eyes, gear dug into shoulders, and every step carried the weight of unseen rifles watching from the cliffs. She pushed forward, steady, unyielding, but her mind wasn't entirely here. It was split. Half on the ridges, the mission, half on him. The boy had trailed them as far as the foothills before a villager pulled him back. She didn't turn, didn't let herself show reaction, but she felt the sting in her chest. He had looked at her like he wanted to follow farther, too far. And in that look, she recognized something she hadn't wanted to admit. He had chosen her. Not the squad, not the commander, not the interpreter. Sorry. Why, she didn't know, not yet. But the weight of it pressed heavy. Hours later, deep in the ridges, the squad halted. Signs of movement, scattered footprints in the dust. Cans blackened from cooking fires. They spread out, rifles raised, tension sharp as glass. And then a sound. A stone tumbling, echoing in the hollow space ahead. She dropped, rifle aimed. Shadows shifted near the cave mouth, figures emerging, armed, eyes wild. The firefight exploded fast. Echoes crashing against the cliffs, bullets sparking rock, the air thick with grit. She moved like instinct, sight finding target, fingers squeezing, bodies dropping. Each shot precise, unshaken. But her chest was tight, not from fear, from something sharper. Because she kept thinking of him. Of what would happen if he followed anyway, if he found his way into this chaos. The thought rattled her aim, just for a second. And in war, a second is enough. A muzzle flash flared, a shot cracked past her ear, heat seared her cheek. She hit the ground hard, grit in her teeth. The world narrowed to ringing and dust. Then a hand yanking her arm, dragging her back behind cover. It wasn't him. It was Tors, the youngest in the squad, barely 20, his face pale, eyes wide, lips muttering curses as he shoved her rifle back into her grip. "Don't freeze on me, not you. Not you." The words cut because she never froze. She was the one others leaned on, the one whose silence was stronger than shouts. But now someone had seen her slip. The fight ended as suddenly as it began. Silence settled, broken only by labored breaths and the drip of blood into the dust. Bodies lay in the open, weapons collected. The smell of cordite and sweat hung thick. She sat against a rock, helmet tilted back, staring at the sky. Her cheek still burned where the bullet had grazed. Tors dropped beside her, wiping his face. "Thought you were untouchable." She didn't answer. He gave a humorless laugh. "Guess none of us are." His voice cracked on the last word, and she turned her head, really looked at him. His hands shook as he reloaded magazines that didn't need reloading. His chest rose too fast. His lips pressed tight like he was holding back more than words. She saw him then, not just as a soldier, but as a boy in a man's uniform, not much older than the child who had laughed in the briefing room. Her chest tightened. "We all break," she said quietly. The words surprised her as they left her lips. He glanced at her, surprised too, searching her face for proof. But she gave him nothing else, only the truth hidden behind her eyes. Night fell hard in the ridges. Cold bit through fabric and shadows stretched long. The squad huddled in silence around dim lights, conserving energy, conserving words. She sat apart as always, but tonight Tors sat near her, not close, just near enough that she felt his presence. He spoke without looking at her. "You got kids?" Her breath caught. She hadn't been asked that in years. For a long moment she didn't answer. The stars blurred above. The ridges pressed close. The weight of the question burned. Finally she said it, soft, almost broken. "I had a daughter." Tors didn't ask more. He didn't need to. The silence between them carried the rest. And she realized maybe that was why the boy's laughter cut so deep. Why his warning hand had lodged in her chest like shrapnel. Because she was already carrying a ghost. And now another child had slipped into its place. Hours before dawn, she woke to movement. At first she thought it was a dream, the small shadow slipping between rocks, moving where no soldier should. But when her eyes cleared, her chest froze. It was him. The boy. Somehow, impossibly, he had followed. Past the foothills, past the villagers, past every warning. And now he was here, in the ridges, where death waited in every shadow. Her pulse roared in her ears. She rose quietly, slipping from the squad without waking them. Her boots found the dirt fast, her hand catching his arm before he could vanish deeper. He startled, eyes wide, then defiant. "You weren't supposed to come," she hissed. "You weren't supposed to be alone," he whispered back. Her chest clenched. His voice was steady, too steady for a child. And in that moment, staring at him in the pale starlight, she understood the truth she had been avoiding. He wasn't following her out of curiosity. He was following her because he believed she was the only one who wouldn't break. But she already had. Why did no one else see him? The squad stirred awake in the gray of dawn, stretching stiff joints, rubbing sleep from tired eyes. Gear clinked, rifles checked, radios tested. The mountain air bit cold, sharper than knives. But no one noticed the small shadow pressed against the rocks beside her. No one but her. She had pulled him back under cover before the others rose, her hand clamped tight on his arm, her breath hard against his ear. Stay silent. Stay hidden. He had nodded once, the way soldiers do when orders aren't up for debate. Now, as the squad readied to move, he crouched low behind her pack, unseen. Her pulse hammered at the recklessness of it. One slip, one glance, and everything would unravel. But she said nothing. Why, she didn't know. Not yet. They moved out, boots grinding gravel, eyes scanning the jagged ridges. The path narrowed, cliffs pressing close. She kept her place at the rear, silent as always, every sense sharpened to the boy trailing behind in shadows. Tors glanced back once, suspicious, like he felt something different in her silence, but he didn't ask, not yet. Hours bled into sweat and dust. The sun burned off the morning cold, and the ridges echoed with their cautious steps. And then movement. Ahead, two figures darted across the rocks. A shout, rifles swung. The squad dropped, finding cover. Ambush again. Gunfire cracked, ricocheting off stone, splitting the silence into chaos. Dust plumed, shadows flashed. She pressed against a rock, heart pounding, rifle ready. But her mind wasn't on the ridges. It was behind her. Him. The boy was curled against the cliff, small body shaking under the rain of sound. His hands pressed over his ears, eyes wide with terror. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to hear war this close. Her stomach twisted. Stay down, she mouthed low, fierce. And for the first time, he didn't nod. He stared at her, trembling, but his eyes burned with something else. Anger, defiance. She turned back to the ridges, throat tight, firing sharp, controlled bursts. The fight lasted minutes, though it felt longer. Bodies dropped. The echoes faded. And then silence again, heavy, suffocating. When it ended, she looked back. He was still there, still staring at her. And for the first time, she saw the truth. He didn't see her as a soldier. He saw her as something else. Something he refused to lose. Afterward, when the squad regrouped, Tors caught her eye. He frowned, his gaze flicking past her, searching the rocks. She held her breath, pulse hammering. But he said nothing, just shouldered his pack and moved on. The boy followed again, slipping in shadows, steps too quiet for anyone but her to hear. Her chest ached with every silent footfall. By dusk, they reached a plateau overlooking the valley. Smoke rose from distant fires. The commander ordered rest. Camp was set, rations unpacked, weapons laid across laps. She sat apart, as always, back against stone, rifle across her knees. And then movement. The boy slid from the shadows, crouched beside her. His face streaked with dirt, lips pressed tight. "You could have died," he whispered. Her jaw clenched. "You shouldn't be here." "You shouldn't either," he shot back. Her breath caught, too sharp, too honest. She looked at him, really looked. His face was young, yes, but his eyes, they were old. Older than Tor's, older than some of the men in the squad. Eyes that had seen fire, loss, silence too heavy for his years. Her chest cracked open just a little. "You remind me of someone," she said before she could stop herself. He tilted his head. "Your daughter." Her throat closed. She hadn't spoken the word aloud since she left home. "How?" "You look at me like you knew someone," he said simply. "Someone you don't have anymore." Her eyes burned. She turned away, swallowing hard. The stars blurred above, sharp and cold. "You shouldn't know things like that," she whispered. "I know because I lost too," he said. His voice didn't waver. She turned back slowly. "Who?" "My father," he said. "He never came back from the hills. My mother says he's dead, but I still wait." Silence stretched between them, heavy, sacred. Two ghosts shared in the cold mountain air. Later that night, Tors caught her alone. He didn't mince words. Who is he? Her pulse stumbled. What? The boy, don't act like I don't see. He's been following since yesterday. Her jaw tightened. Silence. Tors stepped closer, eyes hard. You know what happens if the commander finds out? He'll send him back. Or worse, can't risk civilians in the field. Her chest burned. She should have agreed. Should have nodded, let protocol decide. But instead, he saved us. Tors blinked. The blast, she said. I dropped because of him. We're breathing because of him. Tors' face shifted, disbelief softening into something else. Guilt, maybe, or fear. You trust him? Tors asked quietly. She looked away, out into the darkness where the boy slept curled against stone. Yes. The word came out before she could stop it. Tors studied her for a long moment, then exhaled. Then I'll cover you, but if it goes bad, it's on you. He walked away, leaving her alone with the weight of her choice. In the silence that followed, she pulled out the photograph. Her daughter's face stared back, smiling, alive, untouchable, a picture frozen in time while the world had moved on without her. She closed her eyes, the memory sharp, the night she left, her daughter asleep, unaware. The promise whispered at the door, I'll come back. But promises don't always survive war. And now here she was, a stranger's child at her side, a boy who saw through her armor, a boy who carried his own ghosts. She wondered if fate had placed him here as punishment or redemption. The next morning, as they prepared to descend deeper into the ridges, the boy walked openly beside her, no longer hiding, no longer afraid. The squad noticed, murmurs rose, glances shot her way. The commander stopped, frowned sharp. Who is this? Her chest tightened, the air seemed to stop. The boy looked up at her, waiting, trust burning in his eyes. She could speak, tell the truth, let him be taken back, keep her armor intact. Or she could lie. And once a soldier lies, there's no taking it back. Her jaw worked, breath shallow. And then she heard it faint, like a ghost in her memory. A laugh, his laugh from the briefing room, the sound that had cracked her stone mask for the first time. Her choice was made before she even opened her mouth. He's with me, she said. The squad froze. The commander's eyes narrowed. And silence fell heavy across the ridge. The silence after her words was heavier than any mountain. He's with me. The squad froze in place, boots rooted in dust, weapons slack in their hands. Even the wind seemed to hush, carrying only the thin whistle of air through jagged stone. The commander's face hardened, his eyes narrowing to slits. Explain, he said. Her throat was dry, her tongue like sandpaper. The boy stood close to her, dirt on his face, clothes torn from travel, but his chin lifted with defiance that no child his age should know. She took a breath. He's a guide, knows these ridges, knows the paths. The lie burned in her mouth, but it came out steady, her voice even, unshaken. The commander's gaze flicked to the boy, then back to her. You brought him into my unit without authorization, without clearance. His tone cut like steel. She didn't flinch. He's the reason I survived the blast. Murmurs rippled through the squad, whispers threading like sparks across dry brush. Some glanced at the boy with curiosity, others with suspicion. Tors said nothing. His silence was louder than all the others combined. The commander stepped closer, boots crunching on loose stone. His shadow cut across her face. If he compromises this mission, he won't. You can't promise that. I just did. The words were out before she could reel them back. Too sharp, too defiant, a soldier challenging command. A mistake. The commander's eyes blazed, but he didn't press further. Not yet. Instead, he jerked his head. He stays at the rear, out of the way. If he slows us down, he's gone. The order dropped like a blade. The boy's hand tightened on hers, small and fierce. She didn't move, didn't breathe, just nodded once, hiding the storm inside her. They moved again, winding deeper into the ridges. The path grew steeper, the rocks sharper, the shadows longer. The boy kept pace at her side, steps quick, eyes scanning the cliffs as if he knew them better than the squad ever could. The others watched him, watched her. Whispers rose behind their backs. Dead weight. Liability. Why risk us for a stray? The words weren't meant for her, but they reached her anyway, barbs digging deep. She kept her mask, kept her silence. But inside she burned. At midday they stopped to rest in a ravine, cliffs towering on both sides. Men unshouldered packs, drank from canteens, stretched aching limbs. The boy sat beside her, quiet but his eyes restless, scanning every rock and shadow. "You lied for me," he whispered. Her chest tightened. "You shouldn't be here. You could have told the truth, sent me back, but you didn't." His gaze met hers, sharp, unblinking. "Why?" She looked away, out across the ridges. The sun cut harsh against stone, the heat pressing down. "Because," she said finally, voice low, "once someone didn't lie for me, and I lost everything." The boy was silent, but his hand brushed hers, small fingers against calloused skin. She almost pulled away. Almost. But she didn't. That night the squad camped in a narrow pass, cliffs leaning close like watching giants. Fires burned low, casting long shadows across stone. The men spoke in low tones, muttering about the mission, the terrain, the danger of carrying a child into enemy land. Tors found her again. He crouched beside her, voice low. "You're playing a dangerous game." She didn't look at him. "I've played worse." Tors sighed, rubbing his face. "The commander's watching. If the boy slips, if anything goes wrong, you'll take the fall. You know that." She said nothing. Tors studied her in silence, then leaned closer. "You care about him." Her jaw tightened. "Don't." "You do." Her chest ached, the truth pressing hard against the walls she had built. Tors shook his head. "This isn't you. You don't break rules. You don't break anything. That's why they trust you." She finally looked at him, eyes burning. "You think silence means I don't break?" Tors froze. For the first time he saw it, the cracks under her mask, the grief, the rage, the weight of ghosts carried in silence too heavy for one person to bear. He looked away. Then God help us all. Hours later, while the squad slept, she woke to the sound of footsteps. Soft, careful, wrong. She sat up, hand on her rifle. The boy was gone from his place beside her. Panic knifed through her chest. She rose, moving silent as shadow, scanning the rocks, and then she saw him. He was standing at the edge of the pass, staring out at the cliffs, shoulders tense. His face caught the firelight, young but set hard. She approached slowly. "What are you doing?" He didn't turn, listening. "For what?" He hesitated, then whispered, "They're coming." Her blood ran cold. "Who?" "Raiders from the valley." His voice was flat, certain. She scanned the dark cliffs, the silence pressing tight around her. Nothing moved, nothing stirred. "Go back to sleep," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. He shook his head. "I heard them before, the night my father didn't come back. I know the sound." Her stomach twisted. She wanted to dismiss him, wanted to believe it was just a child's fear. But something in his voice, steady, sure, old beyond his years, cut deeper than any warning. She crouched beside him, eyes scanning the black ridges, and then she heard it. A scrape. A whisper. Too soft for normal ears, but not for hers. Her heart slammed. He was right. The attack came before dawn. Shadows poured from the cliffs, rifles flashing, blades glinting. The squad woke to chaos, shouts, gunfire. She was already on her feet, rifle blazing, pulling the boy behind cover. Bullets sparked against stone, firelight exploding into smoke. Tors was shouting orders, the commander roaring, men firing blind into the dark. The boy clutched her arm, eyes wide, trembling. "You believe me now?" She didn't answer, just held him close, firing controlled bursts, every shot sharp, precise, deadly. Her silence wasn't armor now, it was fury. The squad fought hard, but the raiders were many, too many. And in the chaos, one broke through. A man with a blade, rushing straight for the boy. Her chest seized. She moved before thought, before breath. Steel met flesh. The blade meant for the boy buried in her side instead. She didn't fall. She ripped her rifle up one-handed and put 3 rounds through the raider's chest. Blood burned hot against her ribs, pain seared. But the boy was alive. Still alive. He stared at her, horror wide in his eyes. "You're hurt." She grit her teeth, shoving him behind her, rifle raised again. "Stay down." Her voice was low, fierce, unyielding. And for the first time, he obeyed without question. The battle raged until the ridges fell silent again. Bodies lay scattered, blood dark on stone. Smoke clung to the air, heavy, choking. The squad regrouped, shaken, wounded, alive. And she stood there, bleeding, the boy clinging to her sleeve. The commander's eyes found her, cold, calculating. "You risked the mission," he said flatly. She met his gaze, breath ragged, pain screaming in her ribs. "I saved it." The boy stepped forward before she could stop him. "She saved me." The words rang through the silence, high and clear. Every soldier turned to look. Not at her. At him. And for the first time, they didn't see a burden. They saw a witness. A child who spoke for the silent soldier. A truth they could not ignore. When the commander finally spoke, his voice was low, grudging. "Then he stays for now." Relief flooded her chest, sharp and painful. The boy looked up at her, eyes shining, trust unbroken. She had lied, she had bled, she had broken every rule. And still he was here. Alive. With her. But as she sank back against the rocks, hand pressed to her wound, a darker truth clawed at her. The ridges weren't done with them. The war wasn't done with them. And one day soon, she might not be able to save him. Not again. Not always. And the thought terrified her more than dying ever had. How long could she keep walking before the blood slowed her legs to stone? The thought pressed harder with every step, every shift of weight against the jagged trail. She kept her rifle slung, one arm tight against her side, cloth bound crude around the wound. Each movement sent fire licking through her ribs. She bit it back, jaw clenched, eyes forward. No weakness, not now, not here. The boy stayed near, small hand brushing her sleeve now, and then as if to anchor her to the world. His eyes darted everywhere, cliffs, shadows, the men ahead. He walked lightly, almost silently, like someone who had learned long ago that noise could mean death. Behind them the squad trudged in heavy silence, faces pale under dust, weapons dragging, every step an effort. The ambush had taken more than blood, it had taken certainty. The commander led with rigid shoulders, but the weight of what had nearly happened pressed in on them all. And she felt it. The eyes on her. The questions not spoken, the doubts carved into silence. How many believed she'd endangered them? How many thought the boy a curse? Her wound wasn't the only thing bleeding her dry. They reached a plateau by dusk, the horizon a knife edge of fire where the sun bled into stone. The squad dropped packs, sinking onto the ground with groans. No one spoke of setting perimeter. No one needed to. Exhaustion was a guard in itself. She sat apart, back to a boulder, blood soaking through her bandage. Her breath hitched, shallow, ragged. She tried to hide it, but the boy saw. He always saw. "You're worse," he whispered, crouching beside her. "Quiet," she hissed. "You need help." "I've had worse." It wasn't true, but truth didn't matter. What mattered was not letting him see her break. His eyes shone in the fading light, wide, pleading. "If you die." She cut him off, voice sharper than she meant. "I won't." Silence fell between them, heavy as the cliffs. Her chest burned with more than pain. She wanted to tell him she couldn't die, not while he was still here, not while she still had strength to stand between him and the world. But promises were dangerous. Promises broke. And she'd broken enough in her life already. Later, Tors approached with a canteen and a look that wasn't quite pity, but close enough to sting. "You can't keep this pace," he said quietly. She drank, water metallic on her tongue, then handed it back. "I'll manage." "You won't, you're bleeding out." Her jaw locked. "Say it louder." Maybe the commander didn't hear. Tors leaned closer, his whisper harsh. "I'm not your enemy, but if you collapse in the middle of this trail, you'll kill us all. Him too." The words hit like stone to glass. She turned away, eyes on the horizon, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her crack. But when he walked off, the boy slid back beside her, small fingers brushing her arm. "You saved me," he said softly. "Now let me save you." Her throat tightened. What could a child save her from? That night she woke to the boy shaking her. "Listen." Her eyes snapped open. Pain flared like fire in her ribs. "What?" she whispered. Voices down the slope. Her heart lurched. She strained her ears, pulse loud in her head. At first nothing, just wind whispering across stone. Then faint far but there. Men talking low, too low for most ears. She pushed herself up, teeth clenched against the stab of her wound. The boy was pale but steady, eyes fixed on the dark valley below. "You hear them?" he whispered. She nodded once. Enemy scouts closing in. She moved to wake the commander, but the boy caught her arm. "If you tell them, they'll think I'm lying, again." Her breath hitched. He was right. The commander's patience was already thin, the squad's trust frayed. Another warning from a child could snap it altogether. But the voices below weren't imagination, they were real. And if she stayed silent now, they'd all pay the price. Her pulse hammered. Speak and risk being dismissed, doubted, branded reckless. Stay silent and risk blood. Her ribs throbbed with every breath. Her silence had been armor for so long, but now it could be the blade that killed them. She woke the commander, told him what she heard. He stared at her for a long, heavy moment. "You or him?" Her stomach twisted, both. The commander's eyes were hard, unreadable. Then he called the squad to arms. Moments later, the shadows below stirred, shapes moving up the slope, weapons glinting. The boy hadn't been wrong. Not this time. The squad sprang into defense, rifles braced against stone. The fight was fast, brutal, close. Gunfire lit the cliffs, echoing like thunder. She held her ground, body screaming, every shot measured, controlled. And through it all, the boy stayed low behind her, hands pressed to his ears, eyes locked not on the enemy but on her. Watching, learning, trusting. When the last shot faded, when silence returned, the commander turned to her. His jaw was tight, his words colder than the night wind. "You keep him close, too close, that bond will cost us all." She met his gaze, pain burning through her body, through her silence. "Or it might save us," she rasped. He didn't answer, just walked away, shadows swallowing his figure. Tors lingered a moment longer, shaking his head. "You're not the soldier I knew," he murmured. Her lips parted, the words slipped out before she could stop them. "Maybe I never was." The squad returned to uneasy sleep. She sat awake, back pressed to rock, wound aching, eyes on the boy curled beside her, his breathing slow, fragile. And for the first time in years, she felt the weight of something heavier than orders. Responsibility. Not the kind written in briefings or barked in drills. The kind that bound blood to blood, silence to voice, past to present. Her wound throbbed, hot and wet beneath the bandage. She pressed her palm against it, forcing her breath steady, willing herself not to falter. Because if she broke now, if she fell, he would fall with her. And that was one weight she could never carry. The night stretched long, stars sharp against the black sky. Somewhere beyond the ridges, more enemies waited. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the mission still hung, fragile, unfinished. But here, in the silence between breaths, the truth pressed harder than any order, any command. Her silence was no longer her own. It belonged to him now. And she wasn't sure if that terrified her or saved her. When had walking turned into falling. Her boots dragged over stone, every step a war. Her wound was worse now, the cloth at her side soaked dark, tacky, stiff, every inhale cut like glass. She thought she could hide it, thought she could bury the pain the way she buried everything else. But the boy saw. He always saw. "Stop," he whispered, tugging at her sleeve. "You can't keep going." She shook her head. "I can." But her legs betrayed her. She stumbled, caught herself against the cliff wall, breath hissing through clenched teeth. The squad stopped, eyes turned. Torres was first to speak. "She's bleeding out." The commander's jaw tightened. His stare swept over her, cold and calculating. "We move. She can rest when we reach the extraction point." Her vision swam, the edges blurred, but she forced her spine straight, forced her boots to hold her weight. "No," she rasped, "we keep moving." The boy's face crumpled, anger and fear mingling in his young eyes. "Why do you always do that?" The words cut deeper than the wound. They found a cave that night, shallow but sheltered from the wind. The squad lit no fire, only huddled in shadows, rifles close, breath clouding in the chill. She sat apart, back against stone, the boy pressed close, his small hands trying to stop her bleeding with strips of his torn shirt. His fingers trembled, but his jaw was set. "You don't have to," she whispered. "Yes, I do," he said. The cave was quiet but for their breaths. Somewhere outside, a wolf cried, long and hollow, echoing across the ridges. "Why him?" The voice came from the dark, one of the soldiers, tired, bitter. "Why risk us all for him?" Others stirred, mutters rising. "She's losing it. He's not our mission. We'll all die for a child who shouldn't even be here." The commander didn't silence them. He just watched. Watched her. The boy's hands froze against her side. His shoulders hunched, small, as if the weight of their words could crush him. She wanted to tell him not to listen, wanted to shield him from it. But she couldn't shield herself. Torres spoke finally, voice low. "Maybe she has a reason." Silence followed, a silence that wasn't mercy, it was demand. A reason. Her chest tightened. For years she had lived inside walls built of silence. Words cost too much. Truth bled too deep. But here in this cave, with the boy's small hands trembling against her wound, with her squad's eyes heavy on her, the walls cracked. She closed her eyes, saw faces she hadn't seen in years. And she spoke. "Once," she said, voice low, almost broken, "I had a child." The words fell into the cave like stones into water. The squad shifted. Even the commander's face changed, the hard lines faltering for a flicker of a second. The boy froze, wide-eyed, his hands still pressed against her ribs. She stared at the stone wall across from her, not at them, couldn't. She was small, fragile, smiled like nothing in this world could touch her. "I promised her I'd always come back." Her throat closed, words cutting. "I promised." The silence thickened. Her breath trembled. "One mission, one mistake, one call I couldn't make. I came back too late." Her eyes burned, but no tears came. She had none left. "They told me silence was discipline, duty. That words were weakness, but silence didn't save her. It buried her." Her hand shook as she pressed it harder against her wound, not to stop the blood, but to hold herself together. The boy's hands pulled back slowly, his face pale, stunned. She finally looked at him, and her voice broke. "That's why I can't leave you, because once I left her." The boy's lips parted, trembling. He wanted to speak, but no words came. Tors bowed his head. One of the soldiers muttered a curse under his breath, not anger, but something softer, sharper. The commander's jaw was tight, but his eyes were no longer cold steel. They were something else. For the first time, her silence was in armor. It was confession. And it left her naked. The boy leaned into her then, small arms wrapping around her waist, careful of her wound. His face pressed into her chest, as if trying to shield her from the ghosts she had dragged into the open. Her breath shuddered. Her hand came up slow, hesitant, then rested on his head. The squad watched. None spoke, none dared. The cave was filled not with words, but with the sound of breathing. Heavy, uneven, human. Later, when the boy finally slept against her, Tors crouched close. His voice was low, almost gentle. "You never told anyone." She shook her head. "Why now?" Her eyes lingered on the boy's sleeping face, the rise and fall of his small chest. "Because I'm tired of silence," she whispered. Tors studied her a moment, then nodded. "Then let us carry some of it with you." The offer sat heavy in the air. She didn't answer, couldn't. But for the first time, the silence didn't suffocate. It breathed. Before dawn, she woke to movement. The commander stood at the cave mouth, staring out at the ridges. His voice carried back, low but sharp. "We move at first light, with or without her." Her chest tightened. Tor's reply was firm. "With she walks, we walk. She falls, we carry her." The commander turned, eyes hard, mouth set, but he said nothing. And she realized something she hadn't in years. They didn't see her as unbreakable anymore. They saw her as broken. And maybe that was why they finally saw her at all. The boy stirred against her, eyes blinking open. He looked up at her, face weary but steady. "You promised her," he whispered. Her heart twisted. "Yes. And you'll keep me." Her throat ached, but she forced the word out. "Yes." The sun edged over the ridges then, gold cutting through stone, spilling light into the cave. She rose on shaking legs, pain biting deep, rifle slung against her shoulder. The squad gathered, weary, wary, but different now. The silence between them wasn't suspicion anymore. It was understanding. And as they moved out into the morning light, the boy at her side, she felt something she hadn't in years. Not hope, not yet, but the faintest edge of forgiveness. Forgiveness not from them, not from herself, but maybe from the ghost of a child she had once lost, and the living one walking beside her. She stood there in the quiet aftermath. The field was silent except for the faint rustle of the wind moving across broken earth. Her rifle lay slung across her back, untouched now, heavy as a memory. The mission was done, the target eliminated, the child safe. But it wasn't the victory the others expected. It never was. She remembered his face, the boy who had laughed at her once. He had mocked her stern expression, the sharp jaw that made her look unapproachable, almost carved from stone. He had done it innocently, with that lightness only children had. And she, against every instinct, had let a small flicker of reaction slip across her lips, a softness, the tiniest smile. Everyone had seen it, and everyone had gone silent. Because in a world where soldiers were expected to be steel, the quietest crack of humanity struck harder than gunfire. Her comrades would remember her not for the bullets she fired or the orders she followed, but for that fleeting glimpse of warmth in the middle of a war zone. A moment where she was not a machine but a guardian, not a weapon but a woman. She exhaled slowly, letting the cold air sting her lungs. She thought of the people who would never know her name, the sacrifices they would never see, the lonely nights, the swallowed fears, the pride she could never show. And yet, none of it needed to be spoken. She turned, walking back toward the others, boots pressing against soil that would forget them soon. Her face returned to its stillness. That small reaction was gone, hidden once more beneath the mask of duty. But its echo remained. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And in that silence, the world learns everything it needs to know.